Hey there, friends and running fans. This is Amby Burfoot, welcoming you to the latest episode of the podcast, Running State of the Sport.
And this is George Hirsch, your co-host at Running State of the Sport. In every episode, we talk to the smartest, most informed, most influential, and sometimes fastest runners on the planet.
This week, we're visiting with Ellie Feller, host of the highly successful and popular Ellie on the Run podcast. Her personal story is just as compelling as any elite runner or celebrity who's ever appeared on her show. So we're thrilled that she made the time to join us.
But before chatting with Ellie, we want to discuss the biggest recent news in running. So Amby, what have you been looking at?
Well, George, as we speak, the Chicago Marathon is just 2 or 3 days away, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think there are two big storylines. Of course, there'll be a million storylines. There always are, but the two big ones are going to be, is Conor Mantz going to take down the American marathon record for men? It has stood at 2:05:38 for Khalid Kanuchi since he ran that time in London in 2002. That's 23 years ago, a long time for a record to stand. It won't come easily for Mantz, but all his performances this year track almost exactly to the time that he's shooting for. I think this thing could come down to the last mile or two, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be on the edge of my seat watching it to see if Conor can bring it home. I'm also very curious to see how Jacob Kiplimo runs in Chicago. Last February in Barcelona, Kiplimo ran statistically the greatest road race of all time. He clocked a 56:42 for a half marathon. And if you go into one of those equivalent time tools, it'll tell you that that's equivalent to a 1:59 in the marathon, or if you're interested, 12:29 for 5,000 meters. That's some kind of running. Kiplimo did have his marathon debut last year in London, and everybody was wondering if he'd run sub 2 hours there. He didn't. He finished second in 2:03:37, which is, let's face it, pretty far from 2 hours. But here he comes for his second time around at Chicago. We'll see if he brings all his potential to the race this weekend. The favorite there will be John Career, who has won only New York and Boston in his last two outings. So it's going to be a great race weekend in Chicago. George, what have you been paying attention to recently?
Yeah, Amby, Career and Kiplimo going head-to-head in Chicago. I love that one. And but Berlin is the one that I took a look at closely. And if it's not Career or Kiplimo, who's the best marathon runner in the world today, I think we would probably have to say Sebastian Salwe, who won Berlin, his third marathon. Amby, he's run all three in 2:02 something. And the one in Berlin was really special because the day got very warm, unusual for Berlin. It, was in the 60s. And then all of a sudden, the second half of that race, they got up into the mid 70s. And that's pretty tough. He went through the first half marathon in 60 minutes and 16 seconds. So Sebastian Salwe was going for it in Berlin. But, in the 70s, there's no way you're going to run a 60 flat second half. And it's too bad because Berlin has a super fast course and a long history of very good weather. I run Berlin once, Amby, I think 20 years ago, and I hit a day like this year's where it was up in the mid 70s, and it just doesn't happen very often in Berlin. Also, just a quick word about Berlin. I want to come back to Salwe and his credentials as the top marathon runner in the world today. But it was the 50th anniversary, and our friend Horst Milde started that race, a great guy in the sport of running, and his son, Mark Milde, has been the race director. You and I have had him on our podcast and talked to him. in the past. And Berlin has just established itself as one of the great races in the world. So, hats off to the Milday family and all they've done for running and in the Berlin Marathon. But what I wanted to get further into with Salway at a time when top runners have been questioned, for at least skepticism has come up around their performances. He's followed a rigorous and self-imposed anti-doping testing protocol before the Berlin Marathon this year. He took at least 25 anti-doping tests in 2 months leading up to the race, from mid or late July right up to the race in late September. And these were surprise, out-of-competition testing using the most advanced lab protocols that are out there. They were fully independent. And then that meant that, Salway and his team didn't know they had no knowledge of the timing, when he was going to be called on, when the knock on the door would happen. And these things cost money to do that kind of extensive testing. And this one was backed by his sponsor, Adidas. So I give him an awful lot of credit for putting himself out there and saying to the world, listen, I'm for real, I'm clean, and boy, I'm awful fast.
Well, he's done all three of those 202s in the last 10 months. So who knows what he's got in store next time around, George. And of course, we all know that the big, super fast elite marathon runners have pretty solid shoe contracts. In this case, the shoe sponsor, Adidas, stepped up and said, we want everyone to believe in our athlete. It would sure be nice if some of the other companies did the same and we had more athletes following what Salway did before Berlin. So thank you for that roundup, George. And that finishes it for a review of what we think is the most important recent news in the world of running. Now let's turn to Ellie Feller, this week's guest on Running, State of the Sport. Over the last decade, Ellie, who's previously a dancer and a dance editor, has built a reputation as one of the most popular running podcasters out there.
She updates her podcast, named Ellie on the Run, several times a week and attracts a wide range of guests, including some mid-pack celebrity runners you don't hear of on other podcasts. For example, Chelsea Clinton or Ellie Kemper from The Office TV series.
Ellie also draws heavily on some of the most recognized names in running, like Des Linden, Sarah Hall, Meb Keflezighi, Clayton Young. The list goes on and on. She asks her guests about their training and racing, of course, but she also comes up with some of the greatest spontaneous questions about their favorite foods or their movies or any other personal quirks they're willing to share. Ellie, welcome to Running, State of the Sport.
Oh my gosh, what a nice intro. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Ellie, we'd like to begin by asking all of our guests for a quick update on their bio. How old are you? Where are you living? What's your family situation? And what do you do on a typical day?
Sure. Well, I just had to think about it for a second. I am 40 years old. I turned 40 in May, so I'm not quite used to saying that yet, but I am indeed 40. I live in Hopkinton, New Hampshire with my daughter and our dog, Ellie. My daughter she will turn 7 in, my gosh, we've got a countdown going. She turns 7 in 8 days, but who's counting? My dog is 10, and I spend a lot of time outside. I go for walks. I have the pleasure of working from home. Every day looks a little bit different, but I do try to get outside every day, walk the dog every day, and otherwise I'm mostly sitting at a laptop while my daughter is at school. The afternoons are for family time. They are for bringing my daughter to dance class, doing any kinds of activities with her friends that make her happy. And then, as any parent of a young child knows, we begin our 1 to 2 hour bedtime routine sometime around 7 p.m.
Boy, Allie, with a day like that, I can't imagine how you do your podcast. Because one of the things that's impressed me the most about them is you obviously work really hard at these things. Stuff doesn't just happen in the world that I inhabit and the one that I think you do. So maybe we'll get into some of those hard work ethic questions a little bit along the lines. We'd be stupid not to ask you some of the questions you so frequently ask other guests. So here's one to begin with. How's your day going? What's up today? How you feeling?
Today is going okay. I went for a very nice walk before this. I admittedly woke up in a very bad mood. I didn't sleep well. I stayed up way too late scrolling on my phone. So not doing anything healthy or productive, just deep in the internet for hours last night. And I was reading a lot of stuff about cancer. That is part of my life and my day is I am living with stage 4 breast cancer. And so I found myself on the part of the internet last night where, there's conspiracy theories, there's all kinds of out there treatments. And I was really spiraling last night. And so unsurprisingly, woke up not in the best headspace. And I knew I needed to do something about that. The mood wasn't going to fix itself. And so I went for an 8-mile walk today, which I just needed to be outside for a while. So I spent about 2 hours walking around my road and on a really nice trail near my house. And it helped. It is fall foliage is peaking in New Hampshire right now. So just being outside is right where I need to be. It's about 80 degrees in October, which is not great. But I had a very nice walk and now I'm talking to you guys. Right before we chatted, I was editing this week's podcast episode for the Ellie on the Run show, which is with Melissa Jefferson Wooden. So that was super fun conversation. We recorded that yesterday. And I usually tend to talk more with the middle distance and distance runners. I don't have a lot of sprinters on the show. That's a bit out of my comfort zone. I just don't feel as skilled talking to sprinters. To me, it feels like a different sport. I don't have an understanding. It's certainly not anything I've ever done. So I was nervous for this one. And Melissa was amazing. She's so fun. It was a great conversation. So really excited to share that episode later this week.
So, Allie, we're going to get back to your cancer and the treatments you've been undergoing. I want to first ask you one of your favorite questions that you ask your guests, and I like this one, and that is, what's the most fun you've had in the last week?
Oh, my daughter and I had a great weekend. And it wasn't anything special or crazy. It was a weekend where we were home. We had a play date with 2 of her friends. We saw my parents and hung out with them. We took family photos with the woman who's been taking our family photos for years now. So it wasn't anything like big or crazy or, it probably wasn't a weekend that she'll remember for the rest of her life, but it ended up being one that I will because, and this is so cheesy, but you'll learn I'm a very cheesy person. We were together and that was all we needed. And so it was just a nice, and you guys know, this is the busy season for people who work in this sport, one of several busy seasons. I'm headed to Chicago this weekend. I'll be in New York City in a couple weekends for all the fall major marathon excitement. And so to just be home with my daughter and my dog, that's a highlight. Simple as that.
Allie, speaking of dogs, I've got a mutt in the background who's going to bark a little bit now. We're just going to keep talking about him. I'm not a very cheesy person, but listening to your enthusiastic description, I think you could draw me in. I'm really fascinated by your background and how you got to where you are, Allie, because frankly, a decade ago, all of us, George, me, and the rest of the running world, we knew everything about Des Linden and Meb Keflezighi, but nobody had really heard a lot about Allie Feller. It's a big question, but I'm wondering if you can fill in a little bit of your background and who you were before you became the running podcaster, Allie Feller, and how did you get there? You might not be a sprinter, but you covered a lot of distance pretty fast.
Yeah. Before I was Allie on the Run, I was Allie in her tap shoes. So that was my whole world. I grew up in New Hampshire with my parents and an older brother in the same town I live in now. And I grew up, dance was my thing. I was very into academics, but mostly tap, jazz, ballet. I was a competitive dancer. By the time I was 16 years old, I knew, and I loved to write. And so I knew my dream. I was going to go to college. I was going to major in journalism, and I was going to move to New York City to work in the magazine industry. I subscribed to all the teen magazines, all the dance magazines. I used to memorize the mastheads. I was just really nerdy about magazines and knew that's where I wanted to be. And so I went to Quinnipiac University, majored in print journalism, which I don't believe is a major that exists anymore, RIP. And then I moved to New York City. I got an internship at Dance Spirit magazine, which was a teen dance magazine. And that was my first out of college job. After the internship, I got hired as their web editor. I was the first ever web editor. So it was my job to update these very now archaic looking websites. And the company owned a bunch of different magazines. So they had Dance Spirit, Dance Magazine, American Cheerleader. And you guys might not have had subscriptions to those back in the day, but I will tell you that they are the biggest dance and cheerleading magazines in the world. And so it was pretty cool to work for them, marrying my passions of writing and dance. But of course, once I moved to New York City on a magazine editor's salary, I very quickly learned that my lifestyle had to drastically change. And so there were lots of things I just couldn't afford, like dinner, rent, but mostly a gym membership. And so I had danced my whole life, and now I was living in New York. I was never going to be a professional dancer, but I wanted to stay in shape. And so my roommate at the time, who was a woman I found on Craigslist, she had all these medals hanging on her wall. And I was like, whoa, cool, shiny, I want one. And she was like, well, I got those by running half marathons. It was the first time I'd heard the phrase half marathon. So she convinced me to go for a run, which I had never done. So I went out the door of our apartment in my jazz sneakers, my little dance shoes, and I ran to a couple lampposts. And then, I probably ran for like 30 seconds, was winded. And I was like, I did it. I went for a run. So proud of myself. And that was really how I got hooked, was living on 102nd and 1st in Manhattan and having FDR Drive right there. So getting to run along the water. What an amazing way to become a runner in New York City. And so the next day I tried to run a few more lampposts. And then because it was 2009 at the time, I did what everyone at the time was doing, which was I started a blog. And so I wrote about my little hobby, and I would go for a run in the morning. I would write about my run on the notes app on my phone. I would publish it when I got to the office, and then I would work all day at Dance Spirit. And slowly my passions shifted, and it got to a point where instead of wanting to go to a Broadway show or go to the ballet, I wanted to go to Central Park and go for a run, and I wanted to join run clubs, and I wanted to do workouts. So I started writing about my training. I called the blog Ellie on the Run because I couldn't come up with anything more creative. Found a little community there of like-minded people. We would all comment on each other's blogs. I eventually left the job at Dance Spirit. I worked my way up to being editor-in-chief, which was the childhood dream, the 16-year-old dream. But as that was my job and I got that dream, all I could think about was running. And so after a few years, I left that job. I went freelance. I freelanced for all the usual suspects: Runner's World, women's running, shape, self, fitness, women's health. So I started a freelance writing career and then moved out of Manhattan, missed Central Park, missed all my running friends, still wanted to talk about running. So I started a podcast. And it just like the blog, it started as a hobby. It started as an excuse. The plan was just, I'm going to invite my friends on the show and talk to them about running. At the time, it was 2017. I didn't really follow professional running at the time. I could name fewer than a dozen professional runners. I could probably name two: Kara Goucher and Des Linden, maybe Meb at the time too. But I wasn't well-versed in the sport. It was just going to be conversations with my friends. And about a year in, I got my first sponsor on the show. And that was very exciting, learning that I could make money off this. And it spiraled into what it is now, which is my full-time job.
So, Allie, first off, let me tell you that we were almost neighbors. I'm speaking to you from home at 110th Street here in Manhattan, so right near Central Park. And it's so interesting how you got into running and your early running experiences. And so what's made you stick with running during all these years? Obviously, you fell in love with it early on.
Yeah, I mean, my immediate response is the community. I think all of my friends right now, or probably 75% of my friend group, is people that I have met through the sport. through
Right.
running, through different companies and brands that I work for, through different events, through run clubs that I was part of when I was in New York City. Running is this amazing thing that brings people together. And I don't think there are many other things in adulthood that do that. And maybe I can say that because I just know running better. Maybe there is a vibrant knitting community out there that brings adults together. I don't know, but I do know that I have met the greatest people in the world because of running. And that keeps me coming back for more. There is nothing like the energy and camaraderie on race day to be, look at any of these major marathons and look at any local 5K. You line up with tens of thousands of strangers who have all been through something similar to you have. Everyone has done those 18 or 20-mile long runs. Everyone has told their friends they can't go out on Friday night because they have a long run the next morning. Like, it is a really cool, unifying thing, especially in a world where we need more unifying things, bringing people together. And so I think, and of course I'm oversimplifying, and this is not a perfect community or a perfect sport, but my gosh, it has brought so much good into my life. And I think when you're at these events, and of course, Chicago's on my mind right now because I'm headed there in a few days, and New York's on my mind because that's up next. But they're like family reunion weekends where you get to see all of your people and you get to meet people. And it's just, I love it. And I think it brings people together in a really special and unique way. And that's cool to get to experience that as an adult.
Hey, Ellie, enough with community and all that gooey stuff, okay? I want to ask you a hard question.
Okay.
You've run 6 or 7 marathons, tons of half marathons, and so many other races. What have you learned about yourself in the process?
Ooh, how much time do you have?
Lots.
I think for me, such a big lesson that I've learned through running is, well, one is there's only so much you control in this world. Look at any given race. You can control your training. You can control what you put in and what you hope to get out of it. But there are always going to be things on race day that you cannot control, whether it's the weather or getting tripped up at a water station or stomach issues. You can go into things with the best preparation and the best intentions, and there are still going to be things that throw you off your game or that affect the outcome. And so I think one thing that I've learned and that I'm still working on is how do I deal with those roadblocks, those curveballs, those hiccups in life when things don't go according to plan. There's not always a lot we can do about those scenarios except how we react to them. And I'm not always the best at that because I love when things go according to plan. I love when everything works out. And I'm learning in running and in life doesn't always go that way. And that's super annoying. So I'm constantly trying to adapt and to control my reaction to things and just trying to show up and do my best, whether it's a run up and down my road or it is a marathon, and being able to maybe be a little bit nicer to myself too, if the outcome isn't exactly what I want. Very early when I started running I started racing more. I was doing the New York Roadrunners 9+1 program back in 2011. And so when you do that, you're racing a ton. You're racing at least 9 times a year. That's a lot. And I was new to racing. And so I went out and I was running 5K PRs and 4-mile PRs and 10K PRs and my PRs were coming so easily to me because I was new. So of course I was improving. And then one day I ran the New York Mini 10K and I did not run a personal best. And you would have thought my world was ending. Like my little hobby didn't go the way I wanted. How dare that happen? And one of my friends, a far more seasoned runner, she said, not every race is going to be a PR, which sounds so simple and obvious, but I really needed to hear that. And I really needed to learn that lesson. And that was 14 years ago. And that has really stuck with me that, again, in running and in life, some things are going to go even better than you ever could have hoped. And that's worth celebrating. But most of the time, that's not going to be the case. And so I would say the biggest thing I've learned is, or that I'm still trying to learn, kind of dodged your question a little there. But I'm still trying to learn. How do I show up? How do I react? How do I still be my best self when everything I've worked for is not coming to fruition?
Allie, we enjoy the way you refer to runners' clothing, the apparel, the kit, if you will, as a costume. What's the best costume you've ever worn in a race?
Oh, so I'm kind of boring when it comes to my own costumes. I feel like I leave the fashion up to the people who are far better at it. I actually really like racing in all black. I like a black top, black shorts. Des Linden once told me, and I don't know if this is still true, but years ago, she told me that she always races in a pair of black socks. And so for a long time, I too raced in black socks because Des and I are the same. So I like a shoe that's bright. I appreciate it when the shoe model that I like comes out in a nice flashy color. Like if I can have a hot pink shoe and an all black outfit, I'm very happy.
Ellie, here's one of those Allie on the run questions, or at least I think it is. I made it up myself. Let's say you're going on a first date tonight with a really cute guy you just met. He's told you that you should pick a movie and the two of you are going to watch it together. What movie are you picking and why?
Oh, a toss-up between The Greatest Showman to see how he handles musicals, because musicals are very important to me, or Top Gun Maverick. I love Top Gun Maverick. I feel like that is a good date movie because it's like high energy, but it does have a couple of the nice love scenes with Jennifer Connelly and Tom Cruise. Jennifer Connelly, who is a runner. She ran the Brooklyn Half last year. So yeah, I'll go with those two.
So Allie, in your podcast, you seem, at least to us, to be a natural born interviewer, or maybe you just do an awful lot of homework. Which is it? And how do you keep the conversations rolling along the way you do?
I think it's both. I do a ton of prep for my interviews. Even if it is with a guest that I consider a friend or someone that I've gotten to know, I still do a lot of research. I probably spend around an hour prepping for every conversation. And I go through and I script out all of my questions in an order that makes sense to me. And then as soon as I start recording with the guest, I know that all of that prep might go right out the window. I might not ask any of those questions because I like to see what the guest gets excited about, what they respond to, what lights them up. Yesterday when I was recording with Melissa Jefferson Wooden, this was not a question I had prepared, but we were talking about all of the fun media that she's been doing since she won those 3 golds at World Championships. She was on the Jennifer Hudson show, and she filmed something with Mr. Beast, and she's going to be on the Today Show. All this really cool stuff. And I was like, I forget. I thought of something and all of the fashion that we're seeing on the track with all of the walk-in outfits. And I asked her if she liked that. And she seemed to get kind of excited and was like, yeah, I really like it. And so I was like, do you come up with your outfits or do you work with a stylist? And that turned into like a 10-minute part of the conversation because she was really excited to talk about working with a stylist and what that process is like. And so the advice I always give people about, if someone's starting a podcast or if they want to do this for a living or they just want to learn more, it's to be a better listener than you are a talker. Like, yeah, it's really nice to ask a question and have your guest go, wow, that's a great question. Like, that's a pat on the back for the interviewer right there. But mostly I want these guests to enjoy being on the show. And so I want to talk about stuff that they're excited about. And I think the key is just listening and seeing what they open up about and what they maybe don't as much.
Allie, I think your podcast succeeds in good part because it is a perfect mix of the preparation you've done, which is essential, and the spontaneousness of the conversations that ensue, because I think maybe that's a little bit part of your natural personality. But, it occurs to me it's really hard to get somewhere in this sport of running, which we're in, without having an elite runner background at the beginning. That's frankly where most people start. They win a few races and gold medals or Boston marathons or whatever, and then they move on to other career positions. You didn't have that elite runner foundation under you. How did you get to where you are today? What kept you going, and when did the podcast feel like it had really taken off to you?
Yeah, I joke that I've made a career out of talking about a sport that I myself am very mediocre at. But I talk to the people who are good at it. So I remember, I think it was episode number 42, so still within the first year of podcasting, that I did start to take an interest in the professional side of the sport, and mostly marathoners. And the first professional athlete that I reached out to was Neely Spence Gracie. And I asked her if she would come on the show, and she said yes. And I was like, wow, like this is going in the holiday letter. I'm telling everyone about this. So I had her on. And then I think the next week I had Kara Goucher on. So then from there, I was like, I think I took an interest in hearing about the professional side of the sport and hearing about these people as humans, not just like anyone who listens to my show knows we don't really talk a lot about times, paces, workouts. Like I'll ask about it, but we're not getting into the nitty gritty of training. We're talking about these people off the track and off the roads and what makes them the person that they are. And so I think within the first year or two, I started to have more professional athlete guests. In 2018, I was 20 weeks pregnant and I did my first live show. And that was really cool. It was in San Diego. I had my friend Chris Heisler. He was the Run Weston concierge at the time. And he was like, let's do a live podcast. None of this would have happened without Chris. And he put together the lineup, which was me, Chris, Meb Keflezgi, because it was in San Diego and Meb was there. It was during a rock and roll race weekend. So Meb was in town. We had Andrea Barber, who is Kimmy Gibbler on Full House. So certainly a celebrity runner. And then at the end, we had a special surprise guest that we didn't even announce. And the special surprise guest was Des Linden. Like imagine a world in which Des is like the last 5 minutes of your show and not your headliner. So it was awesome. And it was, I think we had, I don't know, maybe 100 people there. And that too, I realized that was something I loved to do. I loved to be in front of a live audience. I think it brought me back to my dance and performing days a little bit. There's just a different energy. And at that point, I had started having sponsors for the show. I don't think that I felt confident in it as my full-time job yet. I was still doing a lot of freelance writing to actually pay bills. But the tide was starting to turn. And then in 2019, at the Boston Marathon, I had never even been to Boston Marathon weekend, despite growing up in New Hampshire, very close to Boston. UCAN brought in 4 running podcasters, and we were kind of the 4 that were doing it at the time. And it was me, Carrie Tollefson, Lindsay Hine, and Tina Muir. And they were like, let's do a panel Boston weekend with the 4 of you. And I think we sold like 600 tickets. I mean, it was free, but sold. I think it was like 500 or 600 people. It was huge. And I think that was also like, oh, people aren't just here for the guests. They're not just here for the athletes that are on the show. They're getting to know the hosts as well. And so I think once that happened, I started doing a lot more live shows, started really enjoying that side of things. And then as recently as 2 years ago at the New York City Marathon, I did a live show. New Balance brought me in to do an event, and Ellie Kemper was our guest. And it was over 600 people. Ellie Kemper from The Office, one of my favorite shows, is the guest. Like that to me felt huge of like, where do I go from here? Because like I've peaked. I'm very happy. This is very cool. And now I just live with this constant need to try and outdo myself and one up myself that no one else expects of me, but that I put that pressure on myself. So, you know, it's a prison of my own making.
So, Allie, we talked about your journalistic background, magazines, freelance writing, and all the rest. But your podcast is more cheerleaderish, if I can say, than journalistic. You mostly don't go for the harder questions, but more the fun, easy ones. You'd agree to that, I think. And was it a conscious decision to follow that path?
Yeah, and I think that if you had asked me that question a couple years ago, I think I would have been offended. Of like, what do you mean I'm not journalistic? But I've actually really owned that. Like, I do want to be a running cheerleader. I always wanted to be a cheerleader growing up, and I couldn't do dance and cheerleading at the same time. So I went the dance route, but I love that. I very proudly want the Allie on the Run show to be a place that runners, whether it's the everyday runner or professional runners, I want them to enjoy coming on the show. I want them to feel like it benefits them in some way. I know, whether it's that they have sponsor obligations to do appearances, or it's fun for them, or they know they'll get their story out to a broader audience, whatever it is. I like knowing that this is a place that the guests feel safe, that they don't feel like there's going to be a gotcha moment. I always talk to them before I start recording. And I'll usually give them an idea of what we're going to talk about, of, if they just raced, we're going to recap that race. Or if it's a first-time guest, we are going to talk about their childhood and how they got to where they are. And if there is some, big newsworthy issue or controversy or anything like that that's happened with that person, usually offline, we will talk about how I want to approach that. And it's never from it's not, I'm not in a mix zone. I'm not reporting on anything. I am having a conversation with these athletes that I want them to enjoy. And so, I had a guest on recently who had changed teams and changed coaches, and there was a lot of speculation online about why. And I said, I can't have you on the show and not ask you about this. Like that does not reflect well on me if I ignore this huge issue. And I know from being in the industry that there were a lot of things that went into that decision that she's not going to talk about publicly. And so I wanted to have that moment offline of like, tell me what you're comfortable with, and how can I ask this question that you're going to feel comfortable asking it? And as she shared more with me about why she changed coaches and teams, it helped me approach that question and say like, okay, now that I know the full story, the whole audience doesn't need to know this whole story because it is personal, but now I can ask it from a place that, that she feels like this is a safe and comfortable space. So yeah, I want to be the cheerleader person. I also do want to lean on the fact that I have a journalistic background, so that I do feel comfortable asking some hard questions, but it's never from a place of trying to break news or get the scoop. I joke that a couple years ago in Boston, I was at the press conference and Nell Rojas was there. And Nell Rojas, a couple months prior, had signed with Adidas. So there she was running the Boston Marathon. And I look at her feet and she's wearing Nikes. And I'm like, well, this is an Adidas sponsored race. Last we all knew you were an Adidas athlete. You're at the press conference wearing Nikes. Like, what's going on? And I asked her that question. And she said, I'm no longer with Adidas. She hadn't yet switched to Nike, but the Adidas shoes, she said, weren't working for her. And so she was no longer sponsored by them. She was going to be racing in her Nike shoes. And at the time I was on Twitter, which I don't use anymore, but at the time I was. And I was just tweeting fun stories from the press conference from the Ellie on the Run Twitter account, and tweeted that Nell Rojas was no longer with Adidas. The tweet, it didn't go viral, because how viral do things go in like the very niche running industry? But all of a sudden, all these like running news outlets were picking it up, and I'm getting messages being like, what did Nell say? Did you get a quote? And I'm like, I don't want to be the one breaking news. This was an accident. I don't want to be here. I would like to hand that information off to someone else. So yeah, that's, I like to be the first one to get a story. That's super fun. But any type of news, I'm like, that doesn't need to come from me.
Ellie, you have trained me to have very high expectations of guests on your show. So I demand to know, where the heck is Taylor Swift, and how long before we're hearing from Harry Styles about his sub 3-hour marathon in Berlin?
Well, I did have, we're getting closer to Harry.
Okay.
I had Megan Howard is a woman. She lives in Toronto, and she ran the first 17K with him, like met him in the porta potty line, asked to take a selfie. He was like, I'd rather not, didn't want to draw attention to himself. But then they end up running almost half the race together. So we got her story. I am in touch with Harry's trainer and his coach, and he's going to come on the show. So we're getting, that's 1 degree of separation from Harry Styles. Taylor, I think, is going to be a little bit trickier, especially considering, she has a lot going on at the moment.
Really?
A little bit. But, she did a 47-minute interview with Jimmy Fallon. So the girl's got stamina and endurance. We know that. We know that she ran during her Eras Tour training and preparation. So, maybe someday. Wow. I will say also, I've not tried to get Taylor. I have put in 0 effort in trying to get Taylor as a guest on the show.
How about other celebrity guests? I know you've had, you mentioned Ellie Kemper, of course, but you've had Chelsea Clinton, and so you talked a little bit about how you do it and how you get, you know, maybe you're getting closer to Harry Styles. How do you go about that? It's not easy in this world where everyone wants to get a little bit of celebrity time.
Yeah. I mean, the first one is asking. I almost always start on Instagram, and I might send a direct message. A celebrity's probably not going to see it. Ellie Kemper did, which is wild, that a DM worked with her. A lot of the time it is tapping my network and seeing who do I know. I'm fortunate that I do know a lot of people, especially in the running industry, that are willing to make a connection when they can. One of my biggest dream guests actually might be happening in the next few weeks, and it is because of people in my network looking out for me and sending an email on my behalf. And so sometimes it does take someone else being the one to make the connection when I don't have a personal connection to people. But Chelsea Clinton happened because Hillary's longtime speechwriter is a listener of the show, and I had mentioned that Chelsea had just run the New York City Marathon. And so this amazing woman, her name is Lauren, she sent me a message being like, hey, you mentioned that you want to have Chelsea on the show. I'm friends with Hillary. I could probably connect you. You need to make the pitch and you need to convince them, but I can connect you. And that's how that happened. And so it's also, I think, just not, I don't know, just putting it out in the world. If I have a dream, I'm going to say it. I'm not you know what, I'm going to keep this one a secret until it happens. No, I'm going to say on my show that I want to have Chelsea Clinton on because there are people that listen. And as we learned, there are listeners who know her and connected me with her. And so I have no shame in putting that out there.
Ellie, there may actually be one or two runners out there who haven't listened to, let's say, 200 plus episodes of Ellie on the Run. And so I'm going to ask you to tell the story about what happened in and around the 2023 Eugene Marathon. And you can even bring us up to date since then if you'd like to.
Yeah, life was great. In the spring of 2023, I was training for the Eugene Marathon, it was going to be my 7th marathon, my first marathon in 7 years, and my first since having my daughter. So first postpartum marathon. Took me, 5 years to get there, but got there. And training went really, really well. I worked with Caitlin Goodman, an amazing coach. I worked with Megan Featherston, a registered dietitian. And so I had all the tools. Training went great. Went out to Eugene. And a couple nights before the race, my daughter wanted to go in the hotel pool and not going to say no to her. And so I was putting on my bathing suit. And as I pulled up one side, I felt a lump in my left breast and immediately was like, that's weird. First of all, how have I never noticed that? Because that feels like a little marble in there. And so I spent that night Googling and going down all kinds of rabbit holes, reading nothing good. Ran the race. I ran a significant personal best. I was going to say 20 minutes. I don't know if it was that drastic. Maybe it was an 11-minute, but it was a significant personal best. Had a great time. As I'm at the airport, went to use the restroom at the airport on the way back, felt a second lump on the same side. And so immediately I was like, okay, something's up. But I think, when you're training for a marathon, weird things pop up on your body. Aches, pains, all kinds of stuff is going on. And I think oftentimes we chalk it up to, well, I'm marathon training. Oh, my body's going through a lot. I have this one friend who goes to the doctor for everything. If she feels that something is off, she goes and gets it checked. And so she was kind of the little, bird in my ear or little angel on my shoulder saying, go to the doctor. And so I did. I went in and I tried to get in with my OBGYN, figured I would start there. They said, we can't see you for 6 months or something, but you can see the midwife on call. And the midwife on call said, you're young, you're healthy, it's probably nothing. Come back in 6 months if it's still there. And I was like, that's not going to cut it for me. And so I pushed for imaging, went in, had a mammogram and an ultrasound. They found a third lump. This one was on my right side. And I had biopsies done. And on May 19th, 2023. It was the weekend of the Brooklyn Half. I was in town to work it. I was doing some work with New York Roadrunners, and I was also going to run the race with my friends. And the day before that race, I was sitting on the Upper East Side having breakfast with Mary Wittenberg, who is she now is my friend, but for a long time, she was the ultimate celebrity sighting in New York City for me. If I was running in Central Park and saw Mary Wittenberg, CEO of New York Roadrunners at the time, I would freak out. I would take pictures of her, which I shouldn't admit, but she knows, so it's fine. So I was sitting with her and I got the results that I had stage 1 invasive ductal carcinoma, breast cancer. And that rocked my world. We ran the Brooklyn Half the next day as, this will probably be my last race for a bit. And then I went home and started this whole new phase of life. And people often say, with a cancer diagnosis, there's life before your diagnosis and then there's life after. And you never forget where that line is of when the life before sort of stopped and it's now forever life after and with cancer. So from there, I had a double mastectomy. I had reconstruction surgery. So I had 2 surgeries that summer. And then I started chemotherapy. I did 4 rounds of chemo, which at the time felt like, oh my gosh, that's so much chemo. How will I survive this? It was very hard. Of course, now bringing us to present, I'm doing a lot more than 4 rounds of chemo, but I did a year of immunotherapy after that. So I was going into the hospital every 3 weeks to get IVs, infusions of an immunotherapy drug. I started on hormone therapy. I did all my scans. I was given no evidence of disease. This past fall of 2024, sold out Carnegie Hall and did a live show with Gabby Thomas before the New York City Marathon. This spring, I was at the Boston Marathon. I went to the London Marathon. Life was really good for Allie Feller. And then when it started Boston Marathon weekend, I had some pain in my chest. London, a week later, there was definitely more pain. I was pretty uncomfortable. A week after that, I turned 40 and I had a huge birthday party and it was really fun. And my surgeon was at my party because she and I have become close. She saved my life. So now we're friends. And I mentioned to her, hey, I'm having this chest pain and there's a weird little bump here. What do you think it is? And I thought it was something called costochondritis. It hurt when I coughed. I was bracing myself. If I had to cough or sneeze, it would bring me to tears. This pain was really bad. And the Monday morning after my birthday party, her office called and they were like, Dr. Rosenkrantz wants to bring you in for some tests. And that is how I very quickly found out that it was not costochondritis, that it is stage 4 metastatic breast cancer that has spread to my bones. So that pain was cancer in my sternum. And man, if life after a stage 1 diagnosis is bad and scary, and it is, I am very much still grappling with what it means to live with a stage 4 diagnosis. I have a whole new team of oncologists. And it's all happened really fast this time around. I got a port because they knew I would be starting chemo right away. So I started chemo in June. I go in every 3 weeks for chemotherapy. I am on a regimen that is for the foreseeable future. So it's not 4 treatments or 8 or 16 treatments. It is, I will be on this chemo for probably 2 to 3 years, as long as it keeps working. There's good news, which is that my scans, I had my first round of scans a couple weeks ago, and they showed that the chemo is working. All of that cancer that we could really clearly see on my scans back in June or in May, it's shrunk. And it's pretty remarkable to see those pictures side by side. So it's awesome to know that the chemo is working and that all of this hard work and hair loss and all of the side effects are worth it. And I am still very much trying to figure out how to live with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. I've met with multiple oncologists up at Dartmouth in New Hampshire and at Dana-Farber in Boston. And of course, when you get a scary diagnosis, you ask all the questions about treatment, about why do I have this? Why is this happening? And then at the end of every appointment, it's okay, what's the prognosis? What can I expect? What happens next? And they have all told me 5 to 10 years that a stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis that has spread to the bones, you're looking at 5 to 10 years. And that is brutal to hear. It's brutal when you have a young kid. And instead of sitting there and going, okay, well, how old will I be in 5 and 10 years? It was, how old is Annie in 5 and 10 years? She's 11 and she's 16. Like that's not good enough. And so it's been really hard to wrap my head around that. I often say I'm a delusional optimist. I probably should
plan.
be.
I like it.
Yeah, it might serve me well to have a bit heavier doses of reality mixed in, because I truly believe that I'm going to live for 40 to 50 more years. Like that's my plan. My plan is to be here for a very long time. 5 to 10 years doesn't take into account a lot of cutting edge research and all of the newest data and information that we have. So yeah, I would say I'm going through the motions. I'm doing the chemo. I'm doing my job. I have not processed any of this. I find other things to talk to my therapist about, which is amazing. I stuff this in a little corner. But I don't want to pretend like I am okay with it or like I'm even yet really living with it. I'm still pretty firmly in denial about that prognosis. I can do the day-to-day stuff. I can show up for the appointments. I can take the medication. But no part of me has even started to wrap my head around what might 5 to 10 years actually look like and how do I want to spend that time. So that mostly brings you up to speed.
Boy, does it. George, we had some other questions here for Allie, but after that, I'm not sure how much more we need to ask. What are your thoughts at this point?
I just marvel at what you've just said, this whole new phase of life, all of it, the chemo, the immunotherapy, and of course, we've been following you, Allie, in your stage 4 and the prognosis that you've talked about. But just listening to you, I'm rooting for that 40 years prognosis myself. It sounds...
Thank you.
You're just extraordinary.
Well, guys, I feel like I'm a bummer.
Not at all.
Let's go back to the part where I'm a cheerleader.
Good. Okay, here's the part. Tell us how you're continuing on with the podcast. What are you going to be doing in Chicago and New York? We'll post this in a couple of days before Chicago. And how do you manage to keep going, Allie? That's what we all want to know.
Yeah, it's tough. It's been really hard to keep doing my job throughout all of this. Because I get chemo every 3 weeks. After each infusion, I feel like total crap for about 10 days. So it is 10 days, and that's half of the cycle, right? So it's like I get a really crappy week and a half, and then I get a decent week and a half. And then in that decent week and a half, I'm trying to catch up on everything I couldn't do while I was down for the count, and then trying to get ahead for the next one. Spoiler, I've not gotten ahead on anything ever. I'm still just picking up the pieces that are left behind. So it has been really hard to plan and record episodes. That's been the toughest thing. In those 10 days after chemo, my brain is not working. Nothing's firing. I have total chemo brain fog that gets better over time in the cycle, but I can't sit and have an hour-long conversation on those days. It feels impossible. So doing my job has been very challenging. And then, you guys know there's so much admin required in this job. There's a lot of calls with sponsors. There's a lot of coordinating with guests. There's recording intros, writing ad reads, editing the episode, writing the show notes. It's not just the hour-long conversation. And so that is something I've struggled with. And I've had to try to be a little bit kinder with myself of okay, you're hoping to get 2 episodes out this week. And if you don't, nothing terrible is going to happen. It's going to be okay. The brands and sponsors that I work with are amazing. And they know this is my reality right now. So it's just doing my best. Chicago will be my first big event that I've done since I got this diagnosis. I announced at the Boston 10K in June, and that was fun, but it was early in the diagnosis. And I wasn't really around a ton of people. I was on the little announcing stage calling out names. And it was short. It was a brief, it was a day. It was a couple hours. Chicago, I will be traveling in on Friday. I will be attending the press conference, which I just go because it's where I get to see people. It's the little family reunion. You get to get some of your networking out of the way early. So I'll be at the press conference, not breaking news on Twitter. Those days are behind me. I will be just there for support and to see what people talk about. I will be hosting a live show with New Balance and special guest Eric Jenkins, the former 1500 meter runner who now has his own podcast with Sidious Mag, and he's just hilarious. So that'll be really fun. I am hoping to run the 5K on Saturday morning. I've been dealing with some blood clots in my lungs. So I have a couple more things I need to get cleared by my doctor in order to be able to line up on Saturday morning, but I'm optimistic that I will be out there. And then on Sunday, I will be at the finish line. I announced from 2 to 5 in the afternoon, which is a really special time to get to be out there. It's when some of the later finishers start coming in. And, by that point, the crowds have thinned quite a bit and the pack has thinned. So I love getting to be out there, keeping the energy high and making sure that those runners at the back of the pack feel just as loved as the ones who broke the tape. And then I am co-hosting the champions reception after the race with Carrie Tollefson, where we get to interview the winners. And that's just kind of like a feel-good event the night after the race. And then if I'm up for it, there's always an after party, but we'll see.
And then followed by New York.
Oh, and then New York, yes. Yeah, and then a quick turnaround. I'll be home, celebrate my daughter's birthday, Halloween, and then down to New York. So New York is pretty similar. Kind of. New York, I'll be hosting a live show, which we've not announced yet, but I'll be doing a live show with New Balance, as we always do. Hopefully running the Dash to the Finish Line 5K in New York. That's my favorite 5K in the world. I love running that race. And then I am working on the broadcast in New York, which is really exciting. I got to do this last year. So I will be at both the start and the finish. They're sending me out to the start this year, which I did 2 years ago, and I loved it. There's nothing like being out there in the starting village New York City Marathon morning. So I'll be part of the ESPN broadcast. I will be interviewing people at the finish line. Last year, my job was basically grab anyone noteworthy and interview them. So that is what I did. And I just was running around the finish and I was like, ooh, guy from The Bachelor. Ooh, former Major League Baseball player. Or there's Chelsea Clinton. And we actually did do an interview with Chelsea Clinton last year, which was cool. So I love that. I love just being there and being kind of scrappy about it and grabbing people and hearing about their race. So I will be there. I will be at the start and then at the finish all day for New York. I'm there all day.
Allie,
I'm exhausted.
You definitely keep the energy high for all of us, and believe me, we all appreciate that. We're going to ask you just one final question, and then you can start packing your bags for Chicago and New York and everything else you've got to do. We give our guests 3 fairy godmother wishes, and just 3, of course. Those are wishes for yourself, your family, the running community, people you're close to. What sound like 3 good fairy godmother wishes for you?
My health, my daughter's health, and my dog's health. Yeah, that's it. Simple. I have learned that without your health, I don't want to say you have nothing, but without your health, everything else matters less and everything else is a lot harder. And so I just wish for my own health and of course for the health of the people and puppies that I love.
Simple is good. Health is great. And that's it for our podcast this week with our guest, Allie Feller from the Allie on the Run podcast show.
Allie, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to learn about your running, your life, your challenges. What an inspiration you are. And we'll see you here in New York.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you both for all that you do for the sport and for the running community. Loved getting to chat with you.
Amby, it's hard to find the words to describe what Allie Feller has done for the running community with her widely followed podcast and how she continues to move forward in her life.
Yeah, George, it is. It was surprising to me how optimistic she sounded in telling us her personal story, her battle with stage 4 breast cancer. She was absolutely candid. She didn't mince words about the stark reality of her prognosis, which she said she had heard from all of her doctors. And then she came up with a terrific term. I don't know if she invented it or not, but she said she calls herself a delusional optimist. And all I can say is, go for it, Allie. You deserve all the delusional optimism anyone can get at this point in life. And all of us, every single person who has met you or heard you on your podcast, which is millions, all of us are delusionally, optimistically rooting for you. George, what did you think of our chat with Allie Feller?
So, Amby, as I was listening to Allie, I could hear the voice of our beloved Shay, who battled multiple myeloma for more than a decade, with such optimism, enthusiasm, and hope. And obviously, no one ever taught Allie, how to complain. She just never got that memo. And no matter what life has thrown at her, that clear-eyed way in which she talked about her diagnosis, as you mentioned, the stage 4 breast cancer, all of the treatments she's been through, her prognosis of 5 to 10 years, all while working full-time, bringing up her 6-year-old daughter, my goodness. And it's no wonder to me, Amby, that Allie has become the most revered and really admired figure in the running community today. And we're all, as you say, we're all rooting for her to beat the odds. And as Shay always said, onward. So onward, Allie.
Yeah, you totally have to love the way the only thing she's focused on is her 6-year-old daughter and her dog, who I think is 10. That's plenty, and she is doing a great job with them. So that's it for this week's episode of Running State of the Sport. We hope you enjoyed joining us as much as we enjoyed spending the time with you. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Until then, please tell your friends about Running State of the Sport. We'd also appreciate a review at your favorite podcast host, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. In signing off, here's our hope for the state of your own personal running. Chin up, clear eyes, full heart, keep moving, onward.